Hello and welcome to another Brawl video. Today we're checking out this mono-green land sacrifice deck, whose goal it is to often sacrifice all our lands to then generate an army of elementals, as our commander is Titania, Protector of Argoth, a 5-mana 5/3, saying when it enters we get to return target land card from our graveyard to the battlefield. It'll enter untapped, and then whenever a land we control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, we get to make a 5/3 elemental creature token. So of course Titania is at its best with a lot of fetch lands, as we can first sacrifice them to get them in the graveyard, so Titania has something to return, and then once Titania returns the fetch land and we once again sacrifice it, we'll immediately get a 5/3 elemental token. And then the deck often revolves around getting lands back out of the graveyard over and over, and combining those with effects that let us play extra lands, so we can keep sacking the same fetch land over and over, generating a 5/3 in the process, which may sound a lot like we're just playing a landfall deck, but there's a twist, since we also have a bunch of effects that let us sacrifice lands at will, which can essentially turn every land we control into a 5/3, so we can often attack for lethal on the following turn. So that's where this deck will maybe differ from your typical landfall strategies that just want to keep building up their mana. In this deck, at some point we're fine with the amount of lands we have, and we just want to end the game by making a bunch of elementals. So then, taking a look at our deck breakdown, I've split it up into a few categories. We've got our initial ramp cards, often 1 and 2 mana cards that can accelerate our mana so we can get Titania in play as quickly as possible. Then we've got our extra land cards that allow us to play 1 or even more additional lands each turn, and those are also stackable, so the more of these we have in play the better, and especially good alongside the next category, which are ways to get back lands out of our graveyard, your typical Crucible of Worlds effect, which then combines with the fetch lands and with additional land drops allows us to go off. And then we also have a pretty large section of non-basic land tutors that let us search up whatever non-basic land we want, and of course we're often going to find Strip Mine, which is a way to disrupt the opponent's mana while still generating elementals with Titania, so that can be a very powerful combo, especially once we get our different engine pieces online. And then there's a bunch of other non-basic lands that we might want to tutor up depending on the situation. And then we've got our land sacrifice effects that allow us to sacrifice all the lands we control. Zuran Orb, also recent addition. Sylvan Safekeeper can also keep Titania safe. And then both Scapeshift and Worldsire can essentially sacrifice our lands and replace them with new ones and trigger Titania at the same time. Then we've got some creature tutor effects as well to find whatever creature we need, whether it's an Still Explorer or maybe a Sylvan Safekeeper if we just want to sacrifice all our lands at once. And then finally we've got our miscellaneous section with a few more powerful green cards that fit the theme, some more interaction and card draw, some ways to gain life as well whenever a land enters or is sacrificed to help offset the life loss from some of our fetch lands. So yeah, that's the deck in a nutshell. And now for the deep dive, starting with a mana acceleration. At 0 mana, there's Chrome Mox. We've got a fresh new art available too now. There's Arboreal Grazer to put an extra land in play. And then your classic mana creatures, Birds of Paradise, Halfling, Elvish Mystic, and Helena Elves. And then Utopia Sprawl has plenty of forests to enchant. We've got Explorer to play an extra land draw card. Fanatic can easily make 4 mana in this deck, as all the 5/3 elementals will also enable it. We've got Glimpse to just find a forest. Lotus Cobra, one of our few actual landfall creatures, but is very good with fetch lands and effects that allow us to play additional lands each turn. We've got Priest of Titania, since there are some random elves throughout, and it also counts opposing elves, so it can also give us a nice mana boost. We've got Rampant Growth as another land search effect, only gets basics. And then Raphalos, of course, also very good in a mono-green deck full of forests. Even have Yavimaya to turn some of our other lands into forests, which can also help out with Raphalos. Then the Medallion will discount our green spells. Then Harrow will sacrifice 1 land to get 2 untapped basic forests in this deck, and that can also get a land in the graveyard for Titania, of course. Nissa, another one of our landfall cards, similar to Lotus Cobra, a bit pricier, but can also find additional elves or elementals. And then the Provisioner will make treasure tokens with landfall. And then a Flare of Cultivation is very good with creatures like Arboreal Grazer, which we don't mind sacrificing to get 2 basics, 1 in play, 1 in our hand. And then Awaken the Woods is interesting, as it will make X Forest Dried Land creature tokens, so those can also tap for a green, helping us ramp, but they also count as lands, so if they die with Titania on the battlefield, they will get replaced with 5/3 elementals, so that's another pretty neat interaction. Then to play additional lands, at 1 mana there's Exploration. Then the Dryad can also fix our colors, turning all lands into forests, which also matters with Rofellos. Loot can also maybe activate to find a creature. The Swordtooth can turn into a 5/5 with a City's Blessing. And then the case can also be solved, at which point we can start playing lands, creatures, and enchantments off the top of the deck. And Orc of Moldaya can also play lands off the top, and also lets us play 1 additional land each turn. And then Azusa lets us play up to 2 additional lands each turn, so this one can also be very powerful and sometimes worth tutoring for. And then among the Crucible effects, we also have the I Still Explore, which not only lets us replay lands out of the graveyard, but also lets us play an additional land each turn, so it kind of does it all, and with Landfall also mills a card, which can further fill the graveyard with more lands. Then we've got the original Crucible, the creature version is Excavator, and the enchantment version is Walk-in Closet, which can also unlock the Forgotten Cellar for more value out of the graveyard. And then the slightly pricier Conduit Worlds can also maybe help us replay a permanent out of the graveyard if we haven't cast any other ones, and that's going to be the only spell we're casting that turn. And then we also have more ways to return lands out of the graveyard with Analyst, can mill 3 when it enters, and for 4 mana returns all lands from our graveyard to the battlefield tapped, so especially good if we maybe just sacrificed all our lands but still have maybe some floating mana to activate the Analyst afterwards. And then Illumina can also mill a bunch of cards and then return all lands from our graveyard to the battlefield, grows with a number of lands in play. And then we've got our non-basic tutor effects, Crop Rotation being the most efficient one at 1 mana as an instant. A land also enters untapped. We've got the Elvish Reclaimer, need to pay 2 mana and sack a land to get one, but also grows into a 3/4 with enough lands in the graveyard. We've got Expedition Map, 1 to play, 2 to activate. Sylvan's Crying is just 2 mana to cast. We've got the Archer's Charm, which has a lot of modes, can also find a land and put it on the battlefield tapped, so that can also help us ramp, but can also deal with artifacts and enchantments or take out a creature. And then Primeval Titan, just a very powerful ramp card that can find 2 of any land when it enters or attacks. And finally, Nylea's Intervention, a little pricey to use sometimes, but can find multiple lands at once. And then we've got our sacrifice effects, which we mostly mentioned already. Zuran Orb can sack a land to gain 2 life. The Safekeeper can sack a land to give a creature Shroud until end of turn. Sometimes you do need to keep full control, so you can activate this multiple times at once while holding priority, because once your creature has Shroud, of course, you can no longer target it with another activation, whereas if you stack all those triggers at the same time, you can potentially sack all your lands and then let all the Shroud triggers resolve at once. And then we've got Escape Shift to replace all the lands with different lands from our library, whereas the World Sire could potentially end up with fewer lands than the ones we sacrificed, but we could also get ahead since we get to look at essentially 3 cards for every land we sacrifice and put all those lands on the battlefield, but we also get a huge creature in return. And then we've got our creature tutors with the Green Suns being very efficient. Finale can also be a nice finisher if we cast it for X equals 10 or more. And then Nature's Rhythm with Harmonize, also pretty synergistic with the 5/3 tokens that we can tap for it. And then our miscellaneous section has the new Lightning Greaves to give our creatures haste and Shroud, can also protect Titania. Got the Rex Sage as a cheap way to answer artifacts and enchantments. Spelunking has our lands enter untapped from now on, also very synergistic with our Escape Shift effects. Course of Krufix will gain a life with Landfall, helps us play lands off the top. Eternal Witness can return anything from our graveyard when it enters, can also get back a fetch land with it. And then a Titania, Voice of Gaia, is also pretty fitting, can maybe gain 2 life when we sacrifice a fetch land, and we also have Argoth in the deck to maybe meld into Titania, Gaia Incarnate. Then a Tribute, also very synergistic with the tokens we get from Titania, now drawing us a card each time. Ashaya turns all our creatures into lands, so now if those die, we also get a replacement elemental with Titania in play. Nissa can double the mana produced by our forests, and can animate some of our lands into creatures. And then finally Craterhoof Behemoth, because sometimes you just need to get the game over with. And then the mana base, of course, has a lot of basic forests, and a lot of utility lands as well. Argoth to meld with Titania, make some bears, mill some cards. Boseiju has a way to deal with artifacts and enchantments. The Green Castle will often help cast our more expensive spells a turn ahead of schedule. There's Avendo, which we can easily station with a few elemental tokens, and then it can turn into a Gaia's Cradle. Shifting Woodland can copy something in the graveyard with Delirium enabled. There's Ancient Tomb, making 2 mana at the cost of 2 life, also gets a new art now. We've Got Broker's Hideout, as well as Cabareti Courtyard and Riveteer's Overlook, which will immediately sacrifice themselves, gain a life, and get a forest. So these can sometimes be better than the classic fetch lands that cost a life, as they can immediately generate an extra elemental, even when they get searched up and enter the battlefield tapped. And then we also have Cavern to make Titania uncounterable if we name Elemental. Fabled Passage as a painless fetch land. Lotus Field can maybe sack 2 lands when we play it, which can also immediately make 2 elementals with Titania out. And then we've got our classic kind of painful fetch lands that can get any forest, such as Misty, as well as Prismatic Vista, which can get any basic at the cost of 1 life. Nykthos can also give us a nice mana boost. And then of course the big one is going to be Strip Mine, which we can sack to destroy target land. We'll see how long this remains illegal in the format. Then Urza's Cave can tutor up whatever land we want. There's more green fetches, as well as Yavimaya, which can turn all our lands into forests, including the opponent, so that can also come in handy when it comes to cards like Nissa or Rofellos. So yeah, that's our deck. Now let's jump into some games and see how the deck does. Okay, we're on the play, facing Old Stickfingers. Often a one-trick pony reanimator deck. This hand's incredibly explosive. Does it actually do anything? Green Sun's likely going for I Still Explorer. So then I don't want to pitch it to Chrome Mox. So then it's kind of as if this hand was just 2 elves, which is still good. Yeah, I'll keep it. Still missing a fetch land as well. Opponent surveils. And a finale. Okay, so I could now also pitch the finale to Chromox, but this turn's not going to change. I would still go for Lenor Elves into a tapped Argoth, I believe. Unless I want a Green Suns for, like, I don't know, maybe a Sylvan Safekeeper, so we can immediately sack our lands after we play Titania. I don't think that's where I want to be. Opponent ramps with Into the North. And a case. So I can play Titania, but it's going to be without a fetch land at the moment. Versus I can Green Suns for 4. Get an Ice Still, and then I could get it before playing my land, so I get to mill, and then maybe mill another land. Yeah, that might be reasonable. And then maybe I keep Finale as a finisher over the case. So green for 4. Get Ice Still, and then I can still play Nykthos. And we mill the fetch land, that's ideal. Alright. So now we're gonna see Stickfingers. Might be for X equals 2 milling Hulamog and Arden, which is a pretty powerful combo. Yep. So next turn they get to reanimate Arden, which brings back Ulamog, and that's gonna annihilate my board. So what's the best I can do here? I drew Misty, so that's an untapped fetch. Can play that twice. So then I'll have 6 lands, 7, 8, 9 mana. Yeah, not enough for a lethal finale. Is there anything in my deck that can maybe deal with their graveyard? Not that I can think of. So then my best play might still be Titania. Get back the hideout. Should have actually considered playing the Misty instead, because I might actually want a finale for something like an Azusa. So I can play a couple more fetch lands out. And I'll just keep getting fetch lands. And then I might have enough stuff to sacrifice to the Annihilator to still survive. So finally for 3. Could also get, like we mentioned earlier, Sylvan Safekeeper. Make sure it's not milled. Yeah, nothing to hit on the graveyard as far as I can tell. So Safekeeper would let me sack all my lands to make 5, 6, 7, 5/3s, or I can just play Azusa. So I get ahead on permanence by just getting back my fetch land a few more times. And now I can go for the Broker's Hideout. Still a chance I mill Strip Mine and I can hit my opponent's land, but nope. Could also Lotus Field, I guess, which sacks 2 lands. Okay, we did some things. Will it be enough to beat a hasty Ulamog? Because if I sack my lands to Annihilator, that's also a way to generate more tokens with Titania, I guess. Assemble from parts. So just a roundabout way to get back Arden, which in turn gets back Ulamog. And now there is an expensive card in exile. So this gets 10 counters. I need to sack 10 permanents. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And I'm pretty sure we can just take the hits and attack back for lethal. So yeah, sometimes you can use Annihilator to your advantage. GG's. On to the next one. Alright, we're on the draw, facing Merata, mono blue artifacts. So we want to have a pretty explosive start to try and get on the board quickly. This hand has some early ramp. The problem is, once we get these down, I don't have a way to replay lands out of the graveyard. So then if I don't see lands on top with Courser, I might be stuck with 3 or 4 mana. So I think I can do better. This is potentially very explosive. So I'm keeping. Question is how to sequence. Could pitch Fanatic to Chrome Mox. And then can turn 1 go Chrome Mox, Utopia Sprawl, Explore. Yeah, don't hit that idea. And then keep World Sire as a curve topper that can also sack my lands for Titania. Okay, and then Cavern's going to be pretty useful too in this matchup. And then I may want to get a fetch out there, since we're going to want to get it back with Titania, which I can already cast on turn 2 here, which is pretty crazy. Opponents may be holding a counter spell, but I've got bad news for them. And this name's Elemental. Titania, get back my fetch land. And we're ramping out our World Sire at the same time. Sadly, this is a Leviathan, so they could counter it. Opponent's gonna peek, seeing the World Sire, so I'm not gonna catch them off guard with it. Alright, time to start the Elemental beatdown. And I guess I can wait until end of turn, not in a hurry. A Relic, okay, that can exile my fetch land, which is potentially relevant. Now I will say World Sire is a little awkward with Utopia Sprawl. So Merata up to 3 counters. Could go up to 4 if they sack Relic. So yeah, I mean, this is not going to be an easy matchup if they have the right interaction. I think I still make my token here. Opponent's gonna Relic. And then we can move on with our lives. Yavimaya turns everything into a forest. I guess we can keep that post-World Sire. I get to play our fellows in the meantime. And these can attack. Happy if Titania somehow gets taken out and we can redeploy her. Although I guess now without a fetch land it's not quite as good. Play our fellows, gives us access to infinite mana. But if they have a hard counter, then it doesn't matter. Opponent actually mana drains, so pretty glad to get rid of that. But probably means they have a good way to spend that extra mana. Well, it would be lovely if we could resolve the World Sire, but I'm not counting on it. Otherwise, what's a good draw? Yeah, Relic does make some of our land recursion less exciting. Thoughtcast will draw 2. So after a very explosive start, we did kind of fizzle out a little bit. Opponent has an action. They're gonna snatch back Titania. Meaning if I cast World Sire, I don't get to make a bunch of tokens. But now the coast would be clear to at least resolve it. And a conduit. Okay. So we can make some plays. If I play Titania, cannot quite play conduit alongside it. This might be good to just get Titania in play. Yeah, if I sack the cavern to the World Sire, then it doesn't look nearly as good when I'm trying to redeploy Titania. They could still use Relic to get rid of my entire graveyard, so I don't get to conduit anything. So let's start by attacking. Hope they can't ambush my 5-3. And then I think I'm just replaying Titania, and then still probably play the lands. Opponent is at 10. They've taken some beatings from our elemental token. And now summonings. Can make tokens when they cast instants and sorceries, but they're down to a single island. So odds are we can resolve the World Sire here. And yeah, I'm all for it. They could still Metallic Rebuke if they put in an artifact with Merata. Maybe sack Relic, go up to 8, put in Cityscape Leveler on Titania in response. Who knows? Uh-oh. Yep. Well, we called it. Titania down. So now my turn doesn't look nearly as good. Since I won't get any tokens in return, I think I still sack a bunch of lands here. So let's see, Devour land 3. So I can sack 4 lands. Keep Cavern, keep Utopia Sprawl. Although I'm pretty likely to get more lands than I sacrifice here. Alright. So we did get ahead on mana. But yeah, I do not get a million elementals now. And I also don't have a good attack. This has Ward 3, which they can still pay if Leveler attacks. But the good news is that Relic is gone, so now we can maybe make use of our Conduit of Worlds. Titania still uncounterable. So 3 cards in hand. Four mana that they can spend on non-artifacts. And Merata puts in Reservoir, that's fine. Okay, so... can play Titania, have to use Cavern as opposed to Castle mana, but I guess I can do both. And I guess Castle also makes use of Power Stones. That's neat. So, cast Titania. Got a fetch land to return. We have a fetch land in play. And we have a Conduit of Worlds. What we don't have is a way to play additional lands each turn. So that's kind of the missing piece. Opponent's gonna remand, making a token. Sure. In that case, I can fetch, play Mystic, play a Vendo, and I can also station a bunch. So that does have good synergy with Titania. Could also leave enough blockers back to maybe double block Leveler, but I don't think that's going to be realistic. Alright, and then I can attack for 5. So we'll see. Game could still go either way, depending on incoming top decks. With Conduit, next turn I can replay a land, but I wouldn't be able to replay the World Sire. Can activate Argoth, maybe make a bear. Now Ugin's Labyrinth. So 7 mana for regular spells, and then no real limit to what artifacts they can cast for free. So Gilded Lotus is acceptable. And Ornithopter's fine. So 1 card left. One, two, three, four, 5. Ooh, wow, Portal to Phyrexia. That's pretty much the most impactful artifact you can get. Well, I guess I sack Titania since I can easily recast it. Mystic and a token. But yeah, that's a pretty big setback. Another token's gone. And draw Crucible, which is a bit redundant. So, activate Castle. Replay Titania. Get back a fetch land that gains life. Can still, let's see. Yeah, this makes 3 mana at the moment. Play Conduit, and then I would still be able to get back a land, but a little short of activating Argoth. Do I prefer Crucible then? I think the Conduit's ability could actually come in handy next turn. Is there a better sequence available? I don't think so. If I play Conduit first, or rather if I activate Argoth, yeah, there's no way to tap a Vendo, so I'll just go for Conduit. Into Courtyard. I guess I can play Crucible as insurance in case they blow up the conduit. And then attack. They can also sack the summonings at some point to get back instants and sorceries, but it's just a remand because of the relic exiling stuff. So they can return a creature. A World Sire, not amazing in their deck, but they might still pick it. Mostly so I can't have it with the conduit. My opponent just didn't even use it. So then they may as well have gotten something else. Alright, moment of truth. What's the leveler doing? And can I top deck something useful? Otawara, bounce, portal, wow, that's a nice play. So they can recast it with Merata and essentially wipe my entire board. A leveler still goes for Titania, so I wonder now if I can maybe use Conduit with World Sire to still take over. I'm taking 8 down to 2. But our opponent's finally on empty. Alright, so let's read Conduit. Choose target non-land permanent card in your graveyard if you haven't cast a spell this turn. So yeah, I guess I cannot go Titania into World Sire because then I can't use Conduit anymore. But we just drew Archdruid's Charm. Opponent's at 18. Yeah, Craterhoof by itself is unlikely to be lethal. I could get something like an Azusa and then go off with Courtyard. And that might keep me alive by making enough blockers. Yeah, step 1's gotta be Titania still. Get back my life gain fetch land. Okay, and then now I can still play land for turn. Make another token. And then, yeah, I'm not hating Azusa. I guess Lumira is also an option, actually. Yeah, Lumira's gotta be the pick instead. Anything that's better, not that I can see. Ooh, never mind, I'm short of casting Lumira. Can still activate Argoth. But yeah, I was kind of planning to have a few more elementals. Had I gotten Azusa, I could have cast her, and then I would have been able to make at least 2 more elementals and gain 2 more life. So now I'm in danger of maybe dying. But I can maybe still survive. It's gonna be close. Opponent got a loot back, which I milled. And wow, opponent scoops it up. Yeah, they know about Lumira in hand, which is eventually gonna take over, getting all those lands back. So incredibly close game against Merata, and we even managed to survive Leveler into double portal. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play, facing Kotis, a deck that's gonna try to steal our cards. Our hand's a little clunky, a lot of tap lands, no cheap acceleration. Can do better. This is better. Turn 1, exploration. Fetch a tapped forest. Turn 2, ideally draw lane, so I can already play the case. Opponent's also off to a good start with the Chrome Mox. And then Eternal Witness can also get back Fabled Passage. Opponent's got an Elves. They still need blue and black mana, but Windswept Heath will likely provide that. So their opponent's about to cast a turn 2 Kotis, so that's also incredibly impressive. They draw the lands, so now play the case. Right, opponent not going for Kotis just yet. Maybe they want to keep up protection. And a Flare of Cultivation pairs well with Eternal Witness. So, yeah, I'll witness back the Fabled Passage. Possible they were keeping up a counterspell instead here. So we'll fetch, can explore first and then flare. If they're inclined to counter. And then Sylvan Scrying gets Strip Mine. Although it may be too late. Case is solved, so now we can start playing lands and creatures off the top as well. Alright, opponent's still not going for Kotis, so they must really be patiently waiting to counter Titania. Alright, now they're gonna tap out. Okay, so where do we want to begin? Can go for Provisioner. Hope that there's a land on top I get to play. If not, Sylvan Scrying Strip Mine. Still seems good. Play Castle, make a treasure. And then now, yeah, let's see if I Scrying, play Strip Mine, make a treasure. Yeah, we're still good. Blow up Zagoth Triome. Can activate Castle Garenbrig, which lets me play Titania and Grazer. They had a Pact of Negation. Although it is funny, they're almost unable to pay for it now. Let's probably just cast a halfling using the treasure instead of shuffling it away. Could also play Priest of Titania, so we actually have a few options. No, I don't need the halfling, let's just shuffle. And then play Priest. So they've got one card left, they have to pay for Pact, so they won't be enchanting Kotis. So we can jump it with Grazer, presumably. And then now we can replay Titania. What I don't have yet is a way to play lands out of the graveyard. So that's kind of what we're looking for. So I can play Titania for now anyways. Forest Dried Land creature tokens, so they're not elves. Is their last card a wash away? A Strict Serenade, okay. So counterspell heavy build. Back to the command zone, I can still cast it. Get back my Strip Mine. Play a bird. Alright, there we go, now we can play an extra land. I think I would still rather Strip Mine for now. Hitting the swamp, which is currently their only black source. And then pass. Next turn I can play Dryad. Scribe Gorger can eventually try and exile a Strip Mine. So let's see if I can find a way to maybe replay it right now. A Rex Sage can play it alongside Dryad with Castle mana. Blow up your Talisman. Can still play Evendo. And Nykthos on top. I don't necessarily have to draw. So I can sink a bunch of mana into Awaken the Woods. So double tap Q, float all my mana. And then I'll get treasures in return for every Dryad I generate, so I may as well sack all of my treasures. So X equals 18. Get some more treasure. And our opponent's gonna scoop it up. This would have been pretty much my turn, but then next turn we have probably enough tokens where we can just attack for lethal, even if we never really got to completely go off with Titania or Strip Mine. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play, facing Herigast, so Eldrazi ramp. And speaking of ramp, we've got a turn 2 Rofellos. A little awkward with a Lotus Field, but we'll figure it out. And then Zuran Orb is excellent. No need to play it just yet. We'll see how many removal spells our opponent's playing. Don't expect too many out of a Eldrazi ramp deck, but they do have access to red mana, so you never know. For now, an Ironcrag. Okay, so I'll get another forest here. And then I could already play Titania, get back my fetch land. And then I could play Zuran Orb and basically threaten lethal next turn. Alright, and our opponent scoops it up, so essentially a turn 3 kill. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play, facing Grist, the Hunger Tide, so Golgari insects. My hand is somewhat speculative, but it's got potential. Just need to hit a few more land drops. And then Greaves to protect Titania could be great. Sylvan Scrying could get the boogeyman of the format, Strip Mine. If they immediately remove Halfling and I don't draw an untapped land, I could be in trouble. Alright, Thoughtseize. So I'm curious to see what they take. Maybe it's the Sylvan Scrying, knowing about Strip Mine, maybe it's the Lightning Greaves. Actually takes the Explorer, the only true ramp card in my hand. That's fine. So Greaves versus Sylvan Scrying's gotta be Scrying to hit my land. And then I don't actually want to get Strip Mine necessarily, because then I may have to sack it to the Lotus Field. Then again, I also drew Harrow, so that can sack the other forest. So then I think I still go for Strip Mine anyway. Although I don't have a true fetch land yet, so I could also be convinced to get like one of these fetch lanes. Yeah, maybe that's safer, especially if something bad happens to the Halfling. I want to be able to Lotus Field without feeling bad about it. Although then again, if I Lotus Field sacking Strip Mine, it still ends up in the graveyard where Titania can get it back. But these fetch lands are also nice to have in circulation since they can gain life. I guess we did lead with Prismatic Vista, so maybe getting Strip Mine was still the play. Alright, now I get to Harrow. And get 2 lands. Play Greaves. Play Lotus Fields. And equip Halfling. So we're in pretty good shape here. Next turn I get to play Explorer, start going off with Fetch Land. Or play Titania. And then wait another turn with the Explorer. So yeah, Strip Mine probably would have locked him out a while ago, but this keeps the game more interesting. And get back Overlook. Awaken the Woods is also a pretty nice combo with the World Sire, since we can sank the tokens to the World Sire, and the tokens also count as lands, which means we get to make a 5/3 when we sacrifice the 1/1. Could have also considered attacking with the Elemental and then moving the Greaves back, but yeah, I don't think it's going to matter too much. They did play Boseiju instead of waiting to maybe channel it, so they probably don't have a lot of lands in hand left, which would have made Strip Mine even more effective, but that's fine, I'll stop talking about it. Ooh, Necropsy. Blowing up the Greaves and the token. Okay, okay. So I have 7 mana here. I think I still go for Explorer. Get some value out of the graveyard. Could go for Vista and then set up a small Awaken the Woods. Maybe that was still worth it. Or we can just go huge and in the meantime just gain some life back. Urza's Cave is also an option to eventually get another land that I won't mention. Okay, and then still attacking Grist. So we're pretty well set up to go off with a World Sire. But as I've said, we could consider Awakening first. That way, even if there is a sweeper, I'll still be left with a lot of 5/3s. For now, an Overlord impended. And a Duress. Alright, that's gonna hit Awaken, so now I regret not just casting a small version last turn. Spelunking is pretty neat with a World Sire, but let's see, can I do both? 4, 7, 8. Yeah, I guess I can. So I can still play 2 lanes out, and then the lands enter untapped, so there's no real downside to the Riveteer's Overlook. Okay, and then go to attackers. And Grist down. And then we still have a nice surprise waiting for them. Although I guess it's not really a surprise when they saw it with Duress. And yeah, we're just sacking everything here. Even the Lotus Fields will probably get more lands in return. They'll all enter untapped thanks to Spelunking, although I don't have a great follow-up. Well, we actually did not find a lot of lands. All things considered. Can name Elemental. So set myself back on mana somehow. Alright, probably not gonna play Reclaimer, because our opponent's already gonna have to cast a Sweeper. Fully station a Vendo in one go, and then can pass a turn. Alright, let's see what you've got. Even if they wipe the board, I can still redeploy Titania. Thanks to the castle, and yeah, opponent has seen enough. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw, facing Calix, Destiny's Hand, so green-white enchantments. This hand is interesting. It could actually be fine, although it's likely going to involve sacking a creature to Flare of Cultivation to get enough forests to get things going. Actually wouldn't mind drawing another forest so I can exploration into a creature and then still flare. Opponent in the meantime with a Chromox, and we did draw the forest. So I can exploration first. And then I may not need the halfling, it's not like we are facing counter spells, whereas Reclaimer could actually shooter up useful lands for us. Okay, next turn I get to play 2 more lanes. I could actually play Titania right away, as our opponent deploys Calix, plussing. So yeah, off an Ancient Tomb, turn 2 Calix is pretty impressive. Chromox and Tomb. That being said, I can Ancient Tomb myself, play Titania, although there's nothing to get back right away, but then I could play Lotus Field, sack 2 lands, make 2 tokens. So that's a reasonable sequence. Is there a better line available? Not that I can see. Can float mana, play Lotus Fields, and then still Ancient Tomb, get a land back, but no, this way I get more triggers off Titania. Even though I don't get to ramp as much, but I don't think that matters in this scenario. So Calix could answer Titania, but that's fine. For now, Innkeeper's Talent into Seam Rip, which can answer either Exploration or a token. Goes for a token. Calix also answers a token. And Rexage is not a bad draw. So Titania attacks, takes care of Calix. I'm not in a hurry to play Reclamation Sage. Since there's no super impactful enchantment yet. So I'll just pass and then hope that Reclaimer survives. Maybe we can blow up whatever enchantment tries to exile it. They could recast Calix, and that's what they'll do. Plussing. Alright. So I get to activate Reclaimer. Sack a land. And I'm probably going for Strip Mine here. Could also get a land that makes creature tokens. But let's keep it simple. And then I can still explore. And Greaves could give a token haste. Still going to be patient on Reclamation Sage. And now could move the Greaves onto Titania to protect her, maybe. So seeing the new equipment in action. Haste and Shroud. Utopia's Brawl for starters. And punishment on the token. A level up talent. And how about a Primeval Titan? So I want to, yeah, we can still strip mine the Ancient Tomb or the Forest, even better. Trigger Titania, and yeah, that's gonna prompt a concession onto the next one. Okay, we're on the draw, facing Leovold, an incredibly powerful card, punishing us for drawing extra cards or for targeting their stuff. Luckily, we don't really do any of those, so hopefully Leovold won't interfere too much. And yeah, all we need now is a fetch land, and then we get to go off with Explorer and Excavator, replaying lands out of the graveyard, generating 5/3s with Titania. Psychic Frog's excellent too. So for now, play Loot, which I could throw under the bus. Force them to discard at least 3 cards. Alright, opponent's gonna go for it themselves, discarding a Villainous Wealth, Anointer, Nadir Kraken, giving flying, so they're not even giving us the option to block. And tap out for Leovold. Alright, Harrow was a decent draw. So if I were to cast Harrow, I get 2 lands, they enter untapped, and then Excavator can still be deployed. And then now we also have a land in graveyard for both Explorer and Titania. Although I guess I'm still capable of playing the land right now, which I should probably still do. Well, that's actually interesting with Explorer, because milling a land could also be beneficial. So yeah, just waiting on a fetch land. There's a lot of them in the deck. Psychic Frog attacks. I'll still take the hit. Can also activate Loot for what it's worth, if we wanted to play around a counterspell. Maelstrom Pulse hits Excavator, but now I think Explorer over Titania. Could also cast a large Awaken the Woods, where Maelstrom Pulse would have been able to deal with all the tokens at once. But yeah, I mean, if I go Explorer first and it survives, next turn with Awaken I get to mill a whole bunch, and then we're pretty likely to find a fetch land. And I could mill a land right now. Could still Awaken for 1, that feels a little weak. Alright, so if they can remove Explorer, I could still be in trouble. Still want to keep loot available. Yeah, Psychic Frog's been doing work. Leovold not so much. Alright, Zuran Orb is a way to sack all my lands, so that's quite good. So what are the odds that this resolves if I just cast Awaken for 5? Seems unlikely. Let me start with Zuran Orb and see what happens. Okay, so I could at the very least sack a land here, which Explorer would let me replay. That opponent's going to tear asunder the Zuran Orb, so I don't get to go off with Titania, unfortunately. I think that's fine. I can still sack 1 more land, and I guess even 1 more, because we have all those extra lands from Loot, Explorer, and Exploration. So Zuran Orb down. Could get punished if they now remove Explorer, but mill Dryads, mill Forests, Rampant Growth, and Glimpse. So yeah, I'll just cast a large Awaken, so X equals 9. Could make it 8 just to play around. Nah, let's make it 9. I don't think Daze is legal in Brawl yet. That are 3 steps anyway. Alright, pass a turn. At least we gain a bit of life back. We have a lot of lands in play. But yeah, still waiting on that elusive fetch land to really get going with Titania. Alright, Lotus Field, that's a way to sacrifice lands. So, what's my sequencing here? I guess just play Titania first. I'm not returning a land, but that's fine. Now play Lotus Fields. Finally found Fabled Passage. So now we can start making lots of tokens. Fabled Passage also doesn't cost me any life, so it's one of the better fetch lands we could have found. There's also the new Capenna ones that gain 1 life each time, and yeah, opponent just has to throw in the towel. Once we get our engine going here, it's pretty difficult to stop. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw, facing the 5-color Shrine deck. About to get even more exciting with Avatar expansion. This hand seems a little too slow. This is better. So, I'm definitely gonna keep Oracle. So I could, yeah, just Chromox pitching Fanatic, play Medallion, and then next turn play Oracle. Seems good. Still missing a fetch lane, so that's what we're hoping to find soon. And then a way to maybe redeploy the lanes out of the graveyard. Boseiju is also quite good in the matchup. And Ancient Tomb off the top isn't bad either. Okay, so Titania's not getting anything back. Unless we draw into a fetch, which we did. Don't need to keep Analyst, so I'll happily fetch. Play Titania. Get back my fetch lands. Fine to shuffle the Elvish Mystic. And then depending on what's on top, I may or may not Rampant Growth. Well, Scapeshift seems like the perfect card to draw here. So can hit for 2. No need to Boseiju the presence. Gonna keep Boseiju to protect Titania in case they try and exile her, maybe. Although at this point I can pretty easily redeploy Titania with all our mana. Their opponent plays their commander, that's fine. Take my turn. Craterhoof would also be a fine draw, but I don't think we need it. So I get a few more lands in play. And then Scapeshift. Can float some mana. Although I guess my lands will enter tapped. So I probably don't need to tap Ancient Tomb. And then we'll get a bunch more fetch lands that can trigger right away. And get some of our utility lands. And Nykthos could be okay. Get the Overlook, Strip Mine, Shifting Woodlands. Yavimaya. And get lots of 5/3s. And get a few more. Still have Boseiju up. Hopefully our opponent's not packing board wipes. If they do, we'll still be fine, I think. Alright, fully station of Endo, because why not? And go to attackers. Opponent takes it. Pass a turn. And they'll scoop it up. Sweet, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the play. Facing Xanathar, so blue-black control. My hand's promising. Can Sprawl on 1, maybe Swordtooth on 2. And then Charm is pretty flexible. Can maybe get a Strip Mine, can maybe find our I Still Explorer, which is great with a Swordtooth and a Fetch Land. For now I'll play a Swordtooth. And then next turn I could already cast Titania. So, somewhat likely that they have a counterspell here. Let's find out. Could also pass with Charm available, to be fair. But we're also close to just casting Primeval Titan, so if they fight over Titania, unless it's with mana drain, it's maybe not a disaster. It's worth a shot. Alright, mana leak. That one's more acceptable. Now the Iron Crag into Signet, so this would have been a great window to resolve Primeval Titan. So let's see, Charm gets a land and put it on the battlefield tapped, so wouldn't be able to still play another 3-drop, but I could go Eternal Witness, get back a land, and then still play Tribute, which is fine here. And then do we get to the City's Blessing? We should be close. I guess one permanent away. If they tap out for Xanathar, I think I'm happy. So they may have to keep up interaction, but in the meantime, we can start beating down with some of our creatures. Enchantments are also notoriously difficult for blue-black to interact with once in play. Our opponent did have the Sweeper, and now a Zuran Orb. So can't quite play Titania and go off, but Primeval Titan still a pretty good consolation. So get Ancient Tomb Strip Mine's an option, but I probably want Cavern and Strip Mine instead. Naming Elemental for our commander. And then I'll resolve Zuran Orb while we can. So then next turn I have an uncounterable Titania. I get to Strip Mine my opponent and sack all my lands to make 5/3s end of turn. So they would need a very specific answer, plus there's also Primeval Titan they have to deal with now. Right, Shieldred is totally fine. So one unknown left in hand. And it solved the equation, so our opponent's maybe getting a Sweeper. Yep, Damnation. Okay, so that will sort of prevent me from presenting lethal on the following turn, but it'll still leave us in a great spot, so don't really mind. They can keep Shieldred, of course. Yeah, still down to play Titania. Can Strip Mine them first, so I get to Strip Mine them twice, hitting their black sources. And then with Tribute we also get to draw, so that's fine. Go to attackers. Could have maybe attacked first, but if I end up getting some of these fetch lanes, then I want Titania in play. And yeah, that seems reasonable. This way we already forced them to pull the trigger on Damnation, and then we're super far ahead of mana. And I can offset the life loss from Shieldred with a Zuran Orb. Still haven't played land yet, I think, so I could still Ancient Tomb, Rex Sage, the Signet, but I guess they'll still have enough mana for Damnation. Opponent's actually just tanking it here. Yeah, I mean, I'll just play Passage and pass a turn, I think. Yeah, they have a Swamp in hand, so they can Damnation even if I blow up the Signet. But yeah, opponent is just way too far behind here, having to wipe the board. Then we get to untap, replay Titania, which gets to strip mine them again. And then we still have a million cards in hand. Sweet, on to the next one. Alright, we're on the draw, facing Obyra, blue-black. We have Elvish Mystic, we have Strip Mine. So all we're missing is a way to replay lands out of the graveyard. Lumra can eventually get some of them back. This one's actually borderline. Like, sure, Strip Mine's great, but this hand doesn't really do anything afterwards. And then if I lose out on a land, it's gonna be even longer before I get to 5 or 6 mana. So I think this is actually a mulligan. Right, this is better. Like, this has a plan with Crucible. So now we can maybe Urza's Cave for Strip Mine. Also doesn't hurt that we can make our creatures uncounterable. I really want Crucible to resolve. So I'm gonna have to try and protect that one. I can still play Grazer since it blocks their flyers. Alright. So best case scenario, draw, I guess, Strip Mine or just a fetch land in general. So we can use it, play Titania and get it back. Sylvan's Crying can get Strip Mine. Alright, so decisions. Could start with Crucible, see what happens, and then still go for Scrying into Strip Mine afterwards. Seems reasonable. Also not opposed to just getting a fetch land that's not Strip Mine, so I can actually pull ahead with Azusa Crucible. But I guess just blowing up 2 or 3 lands is good enough here. They could maybe remove Azusa in response, but nope. Strip Mine claims another victim. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play, facing Heliod. So this is the enchantment version. Okay. Our hand seems fine. Fanatic into maybe a Harrow. Opponent with a Chrome Mox, so they're off to a nice start. Pitching Memory Lapse. Yeah, this is the Heliod that plays well with other instants. For now, Mindstone. Okay, so they could already play their commander next turn. Harrow is an instant, so we can keep that available, as opposed to tapping out for Explore. That seems fine. Opponent does nothing, so maybe just holding a counter spell. Now search for Skanta. So if they counter Harrow, I won't be able to Titania, but I'll be able to resolve Explore, so I think that's still worth it. Even though getting this counter doesn't feel great. If they have both a counter and removal for Fanatic, it is kind of a blowout. Right, 3 steps, so now Coast is clear for Explorer to resolve. And even have a Chrome Mox, so could even go for Titania first. Pitching Eternal Witness, yeah, that seems fine. May as well go for the Overlook to gain a life. So we're on the board. And I still have some nice leftovers. 4 cards in graveyard for Azcanta. And now solve the equation, maybe getting a board wipe. And gets a Source to Plowshares instead. That's fine. Back to the command zone. And I can just recast it right now. Thanks to Fnatic making a bunch of mana. And then I can even still play I Still Explore afterwards. So don't mind if I do. Get back now. Can go for Windswept Heath. I guess I'll still play Explorer here. Then fetch, so I also get to mill. Maybe we'll mill a Strip Mine. Otherwise, Overlook seems like the better one. Okay, hit you for 5, and yeah, we'll see if they did have a board wipe in hand after all. Maybe Azcanta can find it. Says no to Counterspell. And Shadow lets them untap their Blains. And they didn't find anything. Alright, sweet. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw, facing Davriel, so mono-black control. Our hand is functional. Not opposed to sacking Reclaimer to Flare, since our opponent's likely to remove our early mana elves anyway. And then next turn, can just Charm to get Strip Mine if I'd like. I don't need to immediately activate Strip Mine either. I can wait to maybe get an I Still Explorer with Green Suns. For now, Davriel. Yeah, maybe the play is to just deploy Titania first. And then maybe go for Green Suns to get I Still. So our opponent got to draw 3, exile 2. So convoluted Brainstorm, I guess. A little better than Brainstorm because they don't have to redraw those cards. Strip Mine is definitely the most impactful land we can get. And we just drew the I Still, so that works. So let me Fabled Passage so I don't lose any life. They're likely removing Titania, but we still got ahead by making a 5-3. And getting an extra land in play. Alright, pass a turn. Davriel pluses. So until their next turn, whenever I attack their Planeswalker, I have to discard. That's fine. Corruption taking care of our token, as opposed to Titania. Maybe they don't want us replaying her. Okay, so now the sequencing is interesting. I think I first play my fetch land. Even though I could just strip mine a million times. Yeah, you know what, maybe strip mining is still fine. So then, I think I start by strip mining. That way I can play Explore and immediately get back the strip mine. So I can also move to my second main phase in case that matters. To get rid of the floating mana. Still attack Davriel. Happy to discard a land. Can make it Avendo. They had an edict all along. So they just wanted us to discard an extra card, which could have backfired, but yeah, back to the command zone is fine. And then I will just strip mine. And again. And our opponent's gonna scoop it up, understandably. Alright, so we get to see this Titania land sacrifice deck in action. And yeah, despite having a decent amount of overlap with a lot of the green landfall strategies, at least we're not actually winning with a landfall creature like a Mossborn Hydra or any of the other +1 counter creatures. So at least it feels a little bit different in the execution, so it maybe revitalizes the green archetype for those that got bored of the typical landfall decks. So yeah, that's going to do it for today's gameplay. Want to thank you for watching, hope you enjoyed, and as always, have a nice day.